Do you spend a ton of time training your SDRs only to find that they make the same mistake over and over again, take months to ramp, and have trouble making quota? Yoda AI by RingDNA delivers AI-powered conversation guidance so that every rep can sell like your top performer. In real time, deliver talking points that help reps overcome sales objections, stay on message, and beat the competition. You'll never have to endlessly repeat sales advice to reps again. It's easy to set up, easy to customize, and comes with out-of-the-box coaching best practices. Turn your team into a revenue-driving machine today with Yoda AI by RingDNA. To learn more, visit ringdna.com/Yoda. That's ringdna.com/YODA.
How you treat someone is really important. And again, I think there's been this unique bubble of like the younger generation has come in saying, look, don't talk to me that way. The older generation's going, yeah, you know what, you're right. We never should have. I'll fix it. Like that's sort of where I am. And now this other piece is coming around the world and what's happened in the last 2 years to just sort of kind of make us all go, particularly in sales. You know, we're always a free agent.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. Now, that was Richard Harris. Richard's the founder of the Harris Consulting Group and co-founder of Surf and Sales, and the Surf and Sales podcast he's co-host of. And Richard's joining me today along with Howard Brown. Howard is the founder and CEO of RingDNA. He's also a licensed therapist because this is a great panel to have to talk about mental health and sales. Today is the first of a number of conversations we're going to have this month in May on this show about mental health and sales, or perhaps more accurately, mental health in sales. In our conversation today, Richard shares some of his personal story about his mental health and why he's become so passionate about this topic. And then we dive into the details of some recent survey data on mental health and sales. Fresh off the surveys, and quite honestly, look, the results aren't good. For instance, just one teaser, 75% of sellers report feeling stressed or very stressed. So look, I mean, people are unable to perform at any level when they're so stressed out, let alone perform at higher levels. So we're going to talk about the impact of this on sales, on the individuals involved, and much, much more. But before I get to Richard and Howard, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. And if you subscribe, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could also give us your feedback about how we're doing in the form of a review. So thank you. All right, let's jump into it.
You know, just talking to my daughter and her friends, the amount of depression and anxiety with young people, with older people, with employees is off the chart. You're seeing You're seeing a lot of suicide attempts in teenagers. They're doing a lot of cutting, eating disorders. I think we're all experiencing a lot of isolation, which obviously leads to disconnection and ultimately feelings of loneliness. I would love to just talk about, you know, the depths of that and sort of how we're all experiencing that in a different way right now. And, you know, what are ways to... You know, what are ways that you have seen to sort of overcome those feelings of desperation and despair? And, you know, the things I miss the most are human contact. Like we're doing this Zoom stuff, but I gave my mom a hug for the first time in 13 months.
It's crazy.
No high fives, no handshakes, no hugs, no sitting down. Like that's the stuff that it just leads to harder and harder times, more isolation. So, love to talk about that and anything else.
Will. Let's just keep going. So, I mean, we'll sort of formally say, Richard and Howard, welcome back to the show. Both of you. Howard, it's not like you ever leave. You're here, but Richard, good to see you again.
Always a pleasure. I'm really glad to be here and excited to talk about this stuff. And got some research and data stuff that I can share too that we collected along the way. when the time's right.
Well, I thought that'd be a great way to frame the conversation. Sort of start there, which is with the.
Well, wait a minute, Andy. Before we start there, what do you mean I never leave? Am I like a fungus that doesn't go away? What the hell does that mean?
Well, hey, you're the boss. This is you have the open door. Anytime you want to come in, you're in. So
you're the boss. I'm just fortunate enough to hang out with the likes of you and Richard. That's for sure.
Very complimentary.
I don't know about that, but yeah, thank you. So, Richard, tell us about some survey work you've done recently about mental health in sales, because it was sobering, to say the least.
Yeah, it was done with the Sales Health Alliance and Uncrushed, which is a nonprofit that I work with specifically in sales. And we got about, as of last count, it was about 750 respondents. So we felt like we got a pretty good swipe of data. People were comfortable enough to, in an anonymous way, to share some things around age and orientation and race. So we are going to be able to sort of splice this, we hope. We haven't, it's going through the machine right now, right? So we don't have all of it put out, but it'll be nice to see that. And so AAISP helped us, and so did Sales for the Culture, where, if you don't know that, it's a sales group to support African American and Black people in the sales world, because there's just not a lot of them, and they don't necessarily have a community. So that being said, so here are the things that we got out of the survey. 58% of respondents rated their overall mental health as either fair or poor. So, for sort of, 60% of people are, they're surviving, right?
At best.
This is the one that really got to me. 75% said their overall stress level was feeling stressed or highly stressed. So we're all carrying this tension around, right? Like, I think, it's nice to have this. It's sad that we are there, right? And it would be interesting to see what this is like maybe a year from now, if it's, still this, this disturbing. The ones that we like, because we talked a lot about work stuff, were only 40% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that they could be open and vulnerable about how they were feeling at work. So 60% didn't feel they were comfortable in their own job environment, right? Which again, just you want to build a supportive world. I'm going to stop there because I can go through things like sleep quality and their sales target. Like, I got all this data I could do, but I'm going to spew it all.
Yeah, we'll dissect these three. I think. Yeah, let's go on these three, because I think that would be enough here that we'll have time-wise for today. But yeah, it's this last one. Not to start with the last one, but clearly there's still such a huge stigma that people feel around being able to talk freely about how they feel. Yeah.
It's unfortunate, and it's one of the reasons that I always enjoy talking to Howard anyway. But he and I bonded a lot over sort of the mental health and the stress, and Howard has a educational background in it as well as life skills in it, and then to be the CEO of a company, he gets it. So that's why I've always sort of bonded with Howard over it. I think it's getting better. I think more of us are talking about it, but it is unfortunate.
Is this something that sort of, I don't know, do companies sort of contribute to this? It seems like is it the individuals that people just uncomfortable, or, because, you look at, there's still, and this is a nationwide problem, is, that we as a country, we don't prioritize services for mental health care, whether it's employer-paid health care or whatever. Is that sort of what seeps through, so people just feel like they can't talk about it?
It's interesting. As you both probably know, the first company I started was a company called ForTherapy.com back in 1997. And the premise of that was that 2/3 of the American public, according to the American Psychological Association, at some point in their lifetime had suffered from major depression or an anxiety disorder. But the majority of people had no idea where to look for help. And so we created a marketplace, a network of connecting people with disparate conditions or concerns with either free resources or paid resources that could help them out. There's always been a stigma with mental health. You simply, and certainly things are getting better, but it wasn't too long ago where you simply wouldn't ask your neighbor or friend or coworker, do you have a good therapist to recommend for me?
I'm still not sure they do, right?
Yeah, in most parts of the country, you probably couldn't get away with that even today.
Right.
Certainly.
So there's a couple of thoughts that I can share on that. Is, my parents, I'm a Gen Xer. My parents split around 1980. And I remember when they got divorced, we lived in Macon, Georgia. It's about 85 miles south of Atlanta. They ended up going to Atlanta to find a family counselor in the 80s. Now, what I don't know was there nobody in Macon? I mean, we were a town of 100,000 people. We weren't, we weren't really small. Or were they too embarrassed to have someone locally know that they were going to a therapist, right? So that's one thing. I can tell you that when I had my moment of clarity, when I woke up in the bed one day just frozen. I was living in San Francisco. My mom asked if I wanted a therapist. I said yes. And then I asked my parents, will you pay for the therapy? And I was afraid that if I used my health insurance for it, it would get back to my job and that I could then get fired. This is long before HIPAA. This is around 2000. So,
I think that fear still exists.
Yeah, totally.
Sure.
I totally.
Yeah.
And through my journey, my wife always reminds me. She's like, Richard, you're way further in your journey than a lot of other people. What you find so comfortable is still massively uncomfortable, and so I have to be mindful to that. But I do think the generations are changing it, though, right? Like I see this, with the millennials, their causes of anxiety and stress are still similar to ours. The technology's just surrounding it in a different way, but they're still feeling stressed. They're stressed about work or loneliness or all, those things haven't changed, since, Mesopotamia, I don't think.
I would just add that, look, I think while technology has certainly helped in many ways to connect us, it's also, as we all know, it's really created a lot of disconnection. It's created.
Well, that's what I was referring to, is that there's this technology piece where millennials can, and everybody, it's not millennials, but where they've just grown up to the phone being in the hand, right? And, that's not their fault, right? Like, you get to blame the parents for that. Yeah. You let me have a phone too soon, all those kinds of things. But it's caused some its own struggles, which is very different than what I went through, right?
Sure, but what I would also say is that technology, as it is today, gives us the false sense that we're actually more connected with people than we are. And while we may look at their Instagram photos or even get a sense of what they're like on Facebook, that's really not a conversation. I've talked to my daughter, for example, and asked her, hey, have you been talking to your friends? Her version of talking is texting at them or Snapchatting or something like that. And I think what we're all experiencing pandemic-wise and just technology-wise is disconnection with others and disconnection with ourselves, because there's so much pressure to be things that you may not be. And there's so much pressure to look a certain way and to hit a number or to excel at work that we're feeling more and more isolated. And support is so critical. And having a network of people where you can connect and openly discuss. So your statistics, Richard, about people feeling more depressed in the workplace and not as safe talking to others about what they're going through. Well, half of my employees I've never met in person. It makes it that much more difficult to connect with people over Zoom. And I haven't had lunch. I haven't had a drink. I haven't been in the office and just been able to sit down with people. So of course we're all feeling more disconnected. Of course, we don't feel safe in the workplace. We haven't built the type of relationships that matter.
I think we're going to kick Andy off because we just keep taking over the show. Andy, you don't even have to ask us questions. Like, this is your easiest episode. So, but
well, yeah, I'll just turn my video off. But I was going to ask a question of Howard though. So in this environment though, so how do you, when you haven't met people, when you haven't formed these relationships, when everybody is remote, how do you let someone know that, yeah, it's safe to talk about these things, or this is a resource or a person you can talk to? I mean, how do we compensate? Because this is not going away anytime quickly. I mean, we're still going to be fractionally remote, some large portion of the workforce. How do we create a culture that encourages people to talk about this?
Well, and I think that hopefully we're doing just that at Ring DNA. But when I think about relationships, it's really based on trust and connection. And so for me, how I feel safe with others is by, first of all, opening up. If I can be vulnerable and open up with them, it provides an environment where they can feel safe to open up as well. And I think that is the most important thing, is finding a place where you do feel safe, that you can open up, that you're not going to be shamed or embarrassed. And the only way to create that is by being somewhat transparent yourself, being vulnerable, and creating an environment where, look, we're human beings, which means we make errors. We make mistakes all the time. And if we don't beat ourselves up, but we grow and we learn and we support each other through it, then we're able to create an environment where people are actually connecting, where they're being vulnerable, where they're able to have trust and take risks. And I think that is so paramount to connecting with one another. And in the same way, it's connecting with your buyers, right? As salespeople, your job is to connect with them, understand. And if you lead with talking about your own vulnerability or your desire to be helped, whatever it is, it's connecting at that core human level, building trust so that you can connect and be helpful together.
Yeah, I agree. There's actually a data point I did want to bring up that we got. This is in the last 6 months. This was a question around the last 6 months. 52% of the respondents either agreed or strongly agreed that they felt supported by their leader or manager, which for me was a little bit of good and bad. I was like, okay, that's better than what I thought. And really only 52%, like only half the leaders are doing it.
Well, the question.
So.
Right. What direction is that trending? And is that trending up or trending down?
Yeah, that's where we're going to keep going through that for the next year or so. But it is about that support, and it's about leading with vulnerability. And for me, it's up to the leader to lead with the vulnerability, to build that into the culture, right? It's up to Howard to share an experience, right? It's up to Howard to encourage that, and Andy, for you too. I mean, you're both veterans in life and sales, and you guys have a lot to offer and can show people that it's okay. It's very interesting in how we do that and don't do that. So I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things we're trying to do with this program is highlight these issues and have these conversations so that you can try, at least in our own ways, help destigmatize some of this. So we're going to have people on the show. We've talked about addiction issues and substance abuse and so on. It's all sort of part and parcel. And you look at organizations like Salesforce that have created these internal organizations, Soberforce, that are there to empower and enable people to have these conversations and get the support they need, which are so important, without stigmatizing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a session yesterday on Clubhouse with the former SVP of Business Development at American Express. She'd been there 27 years, and she built their whole sales team globally, right? And that was all done remote. And we asked, like, what did you guys do? How did you build those connections? And she said, one of the best activities were anytime you do something on Zoom with a pet, everybody shows up. Bring your pet to the Zoom meeting for 30 minutes. That's a good one. Another one was the kid picture, like bring in your high school picture or whatever, like have, this is all vulnerable. This is all stuff that has nothing to do with work. And then she said one of the other great ones was everybody has to bring a piece of paper and some crayons, because everybody's got crayons around the house, and they have to draw a picture of their favorite moment from the week. And it doesn't have to be work. It's just whatever they felt like. And it was a way to it's crayon. Like it brings back this kid environment. It helps you sort of express yourself. And I was like, one, I was like, well, those are great ideas. And then I was like, holy shit, American Express. Like, that's cool. They get it, which was not what I would have thought, right? I would have thought they were all sort of buttoned up, Wall Street. So it was interesting.
Well, I think, isn't that part of the problem, though, is that we tend to think that tech is so leading edge in so many respects, and it really isn't, especially when it comes to some of these things like we're talking about here today. I mean, so you said 75% of respondents, right, their feeling of stress is being stressed or highly stressed.
Yeah.
I mean, what, in your opinion, Richard, what's sort of the biggest causes of the stress today?
Oh God. I mean, there's a lot of them. I also think that as a society, particularly in America, we're so heightened right now between, what happened in politics, what happened with social justice, what's happening with the economy, COVID, the politicization of whether or not you're going to get a vaccine. Like, we're so heightened at this stage that everything throws us off, right? So I think that now, couple that with, I'm now a stay-at-home mom. Maybe I'm a single stay-at-home mom. My kid's 7 years old and trying to do distance learning. Like I've got two kids. Like mine are 11 and 12, and it's like I could not imagine if I'd had a 3, 4, 5, or 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid trying to do distance learning. Then you have the work from home, which is good, but it also has forced us, or I wouldn't say forced, it's encouraged us to work longer hours, right?
Sure.
Encouraged us to, okay, so I'm going to do this with school. Okay, so from 7 to 9 tonight, now I got to get back and get to that email, right? I think that's what's been coming through. I think the goals has always been a challenge for salespeople. I'm leery of good goals and bad goals and stretch goals and COVID goals. I've got a couple of clients where their company's actually looking at 2021 to make up for what they missed in 2020. It's kind of like, in my mind, and look, there were plenty of businesses, you guys may have been one of them, Ring DNA may have been one of them that this worked out well for, right? Like, the digital transformation helped. But I got a lot of companies where they think they can go back and just put that pressure on the salespeople. And I'm like, what have you not learned anything? Like, what have you been paying attention to? Mm-hmm. So, anyway, so I think it's all those things that are adding on to it. And so it's just been piled on for the last it's probably been piled on for the last 24 months, starting with the election and politics. And then it just kind of kept going, right? Which I think we all realize, right? Like for 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what I'm really happy about is that more and more companies are recognizing the importance of mental health and providing mental health benefits and having HR services, or just recognizing that there's more to employees than just the job, the productivity that they bring to the organization, that culture and vulnerability and focused on well-being is really a nice movement. And you go back 30, 40 years, I mean, none of that exists, right? Like, you had to have a union that even would step in for people that, you're working too many hours at 16 hours a day or whatever it is. So there is nice progress. There is some progress. It's way too slow, no doubt about it. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And, we're doing a lot. Andy's doing a bunch of shows in recognition of mental health awareness. But I think what's really important is you're not alone. None of us are alone. We all suffer from different forms of anxiety and depression and stress. We're impacted by whether we eat too much or eat too little, or sleep, we're not exercising, we're struggling with our parents, our children, our spouses. there are real struggles that all of us are experiencing, and it's magnified through this period. We're all stuck in an environment, we've lost freedoms, and yet we still have more and more responsibilities. So that is a recipe for disaster and more mental health challenges. And we continue to medicate, and we continue to do all these things for the quick fix. And look, I'm not against medication. I think it's a miracle that we have medications that help people.
I use it daily, so I'm down with it.
Yeah, it is game changing, life saving, and wonderful. And it is a piece of the puzzle. And the other pieces are finding a community, a network that can be supportive of you. It is being open and vulnerable about your problems. It is talking to professional help. It is reaching your hand out and helping another person, because a lot of people forget that when you suffer from low self-esteem, when you're suffering from your own anxiety, depression, alcoholism, the way to help yourself is to reach out and help somebody else, because it gives you that sense of value. It gives you a sense of worth. And we forget about that piece, but that piece is the piece that ultimately realigns our thinking to we're not that bad, and we can be an active, productive, positive member of society. So, on top of everything else, be there for somebody else. It feels really, really good. And it's one of the easiest things you can do is literally just reach out to someone, ask them how they're doing today. Shut up. I know that's hard for all of us, but shut up and listen. Just be a mirror, reflect what they're going through. Let them know that you've experienced it too, if it's something you've experienced. Like, let's get back to being there for one another. We're living in a selfie society where it's all about look at me, look at me, look at me. It's killing us. Let's look out for others. Let's reach out to others, and let's see how they are doing.
It's like a good summation if we're going to be finishing right at that moment. It's fantastic. So, but a question that's sort of going back to the sales and stress. I mean, is it, the numbers I've seen is that, the levels may have risen 25, 30%, but we're still talking about a majority of sellers, I would envision, are still feeling stressed or highly stressed at any one time. Is it regardless of sort of setting aside the current external stresses that exist, is it possible to run a sales organization without stress?
It's a really good question. Anything that's a meritocracy, right, which is what sales is, will bring a certain level of stress, right? Whether it's sports, sales, where, anytime you're trying to get better, there's going to be a certain level of stress. I think what's different now, and Howard was talking about, is that, you can acknowledge that stress. I had a conversation. It used to be, hey, and I used to say this. I used to say, hey, you know what? The cool thing about work is, you can leave all that life stuff behind you at the door. You can come in and focus on this, and this will be your good part of the day. And it's like, what an asshole I was. Like, really? Ultimately, it's kind of like, if you really want to lead with empathy in sales, which seems to be the big buzzword, and authenticity, then you need to come complete and whole as who you are in yourself. And leadership has to understand that, right? Now, I'm not saying that, someone whose cat died gets, 4 days of bereavement. I get it. Like, there's a balance there. But, find the balance. Don't pretend like it doesn't exist. So I don't think you can run a sales team without stress. I don't think you can have a successful anything without stress. And there are healthy amounts and there are unhealthy amounts. And, Dr. Howard could probably tell us better what that is.
Well, I think that was really the question is can you have healthy amounts of stress? Yeah. I mean, there's pressure to perform. We're never going to get out of that in sales. But there's differences in how organizations are run. Some where you look at the people on the team and they're all highly stressed, and others where it's like, I worked for a CEO once who said, look, I never want to have an organization where people feel like, every month there's a sword hanging over the back of their neck.
Right.
And he, by and large, was successful at that. So, Howard.
Yeah, I would just say that, look, people have stress for a variety of different reasons. Some people actually are fueled by stress that fuels them. And I think salespeople, athletes, they have that in adrenaline, the endorphin, the rush from it. Not all stress is bad stress. If you want to cause stress, push change. Change is equal to stress, and as we grow, we create stress. As we make mistakes, we create stress. As we enter environments that are not completely familiar to us, it creates stress. It's the accumulation of stress without the recognition of it, or the inability to take a break or to make a change that says, wait a minute, I've hit my limit. I've recognized that I'm no longer responding to the stress, but I'm reacting to it. And my reaction causes additional stress. So it's being aware of your moment, your body, how you're feeling, when enough is too much. And it's usually once you recognize it, it's too late. So if you're even starting to think about the stress is too much, you've probably crossed the limit. So I don't think that you can create a sales environment or a competitive environment or a learning environment that is stress-free. I think that's unfortunately Pollyanna-ish. But you can recognize that stress is an important part of growth and change, and that there are levels of stress. And the more you accept that you're going to go through stress, and that it's how you deal with it, respond to it, how you react, that's going to make the difference. I mean, when you talk about Richard, like, you thought you were going to leave everything behind and show up to work, right? And you'd be stress-free. Or the problem is we bring ourselves wherever we are, and we are the problem. And so if we don't deal with the problem, guess what? I'm at work and I'm the problem. I'm at home, I'm the problem. I can't escape me. I bring me wherever I am. And so if you are the problem and you are not dealing with you, the problem, everywhere and everybody will create stress for you, and you will create it in turn for them, which becomes a very toxic environment and not good for anybody.
Well, is there a role in companies to help people in sales learn how to manage stress?
I want to answer this. So, and I hope I'm not putting Howard on the spot on this one.
Please.
The challenge is that, particularly in sales, I don't know about other departments, and I could see it being the same. Salespeople are promoted because they hit a number, they can handle objections, they can navigate a complex deal, right? They can handle rejection. Nowhere in there is there, hey, you know how to handle someone whose mother just passed away, right? There's no management training. It never existed. Like, maybe if you worked at a big company, right? If you did go work for the Amexes and the IBMs of the world way back when, there's no soft skills training of management, of compassion and empathy and understanding what those words mean and how do you do it and how do you listen and how do you activate it and those kinds of things. So to me, it falls at the highest level. It falls much higher at the executive level, the C level, to go, are we teaching all of our leaders how to be leaders? Mm-hmm. Right? There's Kevin Dorsey. There's a great quote Kevin Dorsey gave me a couple of weeks ago. There are tons of great leaders who are managers, and there are tons of managers who are terrible leaders, and those are two very, very different things. So anyway, so I'm hoping over time that it becomes the next set of skills that really needs to be taught at. And I'm going to say the smaller orgs. I'm hoping the bigger orgs do it. I don't know where you guys fall in that world. So.
Well, I'd love to weigh in on this because I think I have the benefit of not only having education and training, but I also, having had my own struggles and work through and continue, like every one of us, to try and be better and make mistakes and hit challenges and snags in the road. I bring that vulnerability to my team and I bring it to my leadership team. And I think that what we're talking about, in my opinion, is not just leadership. It has to do with coaching. And, people think of sales leaders, they're not thinking of coaches. And what a coach does is a coach understands their player, their team. They understand the individual and what motivates them. And so, yes, there's numbers and there's stressors, but if I make a connection with each person on my team and I understand what their motivations are, what their challenges are, if they feel like I'm there to help them, to support them, yes, it's to hit a number, but it's also to create a highly functioning team that's supportive of one another and understands each other and then is able to be there in the way that they can be there. So you have different team players that are excellent at certain skills. How do the world-class teams perform? They perform well together. They don't all do the exact same thing. They understand their strengths. They understand their weaknesses. They're focused on how to win as a team. And as sales organizations, if we start thinking about not just the rep hitting the number, but the whole team hits the number. As a sales leader, my team has to hit their number, not me. It's not my number, it's my team's number. And my job is to make sure each one of them not just hits their number, but feels good and is working as a collaborative unit. That to me is how we lead. It's how we manage, and it better be an important part of how we coach. And teaching people how to manage is very different than teaching people how to coach. We need to invest more in coaching and spending time understanding our individuals and developing that team structure.
Well, I think that's the point perhaps Richard is making, is that companies don't invest in that, right? I mean, it's we spend a lot of money every year in sales training. We spend comparatively very little training our frontline managers. And
you'd be surprised how many don't spend money on sales training.
Well, yeah, I know. But I mean, just in general, the number, it's a big number in aggregate. It's like $20 billion a year. And how much do we spend? You may have heard me make the comment is we should spend 90% of that, just to Howard's point, is teaching managers and leaders how to coach. Because we know that coaching moves the needle in performance, but also to your other point, Howard, is it's how you connect with someone. And we just presume we promote somebody. They have suddenly, by virtue of having the title, they have this knowledge and understanding of how to do these things. And they don't. They haven't been enabled to do it. But that is true of frontline managers, it's true of director level, it's true of VP level. Nobody is getting this training. And that's why it flows downhill, that no one, in my opinion, why no one lends any importance to it, because, yeah, I'm at the VP level and I didn't get that. So, and then just, it must not be important.
I think there's some legal stuff around it too. I think there's like, if I have a conversation, look, I'm in California, right? If I have a conversation about someone's health, what liability do I have now as their employer, right? Like, I think there's several pieces to that, right? But I do agree with you 1,000%, Andy. It's like, I didn't do it, heck with them, make them figure it out themselves.
Tough love, right? Like tough love. But come on, I think I just believe that there's economic incentive for sales leaders, for executives to invest in coaching. Because if you do a really great job coaching, you know what you're doing? You're mirroring how your salespeople should be selling, right? Because they have to find that champion within the organization. They have to help coach them. They have to build that connection. These are the things that you're mirroring to your team that they're hopefully taking into their prospect and customer conversations. That's not just about helping your team work through, or your individual work through their challenge or issue. It's helping them to be a better person, better sales rep, and perform better.
I'm telling you, like, some of the best salespeople I know, once you become a parent, sales has a whole new way, right? Like doing things, right? and I don't mean everybody, not everybody. If you don't want to be a parent, don't be. And it doesn't mean you have that you can't be great at sales, but it definitely changes, right? Because we have to model the behavior we want our kids to use. If my kids see me flipping out, at the Comcast guy on the phone because I've been on hold for an hour, guess what they're going to do, right? They're going to flip out because that's what Dad did. And I'm not saying I did, and I'm not saying I didn't do that.
Sure.
But to your point, Howard, that's what makes them all better humans, right? And that's where bringing this, all of ourselves to us to work, and in the sales world and the leadership role really matter. And I think the problem is I don't think the coaches know how to coach, right?
No, they don't. They don't. But I mean, we can address that. I always remember this quote from, as everybody knows, I'm a big soccer fan, and there's one of the Premier League teams in England was saying, yeah, when we bring new players into the organization, the first thing we do is we train the person before we train the player. And I just remember taking that and cutting and pasting it, because like, that's what we need to be doing, right? We assume people come into sales with some sort of set of skills and emotional intelligence and so on to be able to handle the job. What harm would it be when we're onboarding people to spend some time to invest in training people in some of these basics and be able to become more resilient, to handle the ups and downs, the things that we just assume they sort of know. And why do we assume they know? Because they don't.
Yeah. Well, I also think that sometimes when we hire managers, we're not looking for the right things. We're looking for people who have had experience in leading a sales team or being a leader or hitting a number. What we're not looking for is people who are coachable.
Yes.
Because if our coaches are going to coach, they also need to be incredibly coachable.
Yep.
And not to stereotype a sales leader or anything else, but that's not what most people interview for. Is like, how coachable is my sales leader? No, it's not. And you want to find people who, just like any sport or any profession, they constantly want to improve in their game. And so you want to find people who want to be the best sales coaches in the world. And that means, they have to listen to people like Richard or listen to people like Andy and spend time improving their game. And so we got to train them differently. We got to hire different people. We talk about hiring sales reps that are coachable. We got to hire the coaches that are coachable.
Absolutely. It starts there. And it's not just in my perspective, it doesn't start with just the frontline managers. It's all the way up and down the chain of sales leadership.
Yeah. And I think the key piece of this is retention, right? If you can do this, right, aside from hitting the goal, particularly in sales where retention is so, there's such turnover, if you can bring in this human element sooner, better, I think it's going to solve the retention problem too, right? Which then is, the other part of the revenue. We haven't even talked about it, right? But who wants to stay and work for that person? I think we all, if you've been in sales long enough, you've heard the study that people don't leave companies, they leave managers, right? Mm-hmm. They leave leaders. And again, Andy, to your point, we can fix this. This is not, this is not a Rubik's Cube. Like, we can actually move this around fairly easily.
Well, but the will has to
solve the Rubik's Cube?
No, but I never did, but it's all right.
You could take that darn thing apart, right? You just rip it apart. There's more than one way to solve a Rubik's Cube.
Brute force.
Yeah. So, no, I agree.
Well, I was just going to make a final point on that. I just think that it has to start at the very top. And clearly, in my estimation, based on all the work I've done over the decades and just talking to people on this podcast, it doesn't exist at the top.
I'm going to ask you guys a blank slate question. The two of you, whatever, you guys get bought out by some company and you still just want to keep working and you guys decide to form a business together. How would you try to build this culture of coaching or supportive mental health into the organization? Right? How would you, granted, you're going to hustle for the first year because that's just what it takes, but how do you build that in as a mantra?
I feel like I don't need to start a new company. I feel like that's the company we're building at Ring DNA. We're a people first.
So what have you guys done then? Then that's what I want to. Then what are those things that?
It's a people first organization. We hire people for cultural fit. We hire people who are okay with their CEO getting vulnerable at the all hands meeting and talking about personal issues. We're okay bringing up really uncomfortable issues, whether they're cultural issues, and bringing those to the forefront. We create a safe environment for people to talk about depression and anxiety. We provide support services to those. We bring on a head of our podcast as an executive member to talk about mental health related issues. We hire coaches amongst our sales team and other areas, people who have other mental health background. Those are the things that matter. And there's not an easy fix, but you have to think about the people first. You create a healthy organization. Whatever you build is going to work because people want to work. They're working for more than just a paycheck. They're working for a mission. They're working for values. They feel like they're a part of something bigger. And it's not just about letting themselves down or their boss down. It's about letting their entire organization down. And that's something they feel is a part of their family. So I think those are the important pieces.
What would you do, Andy? Where do you feel like you to Howard's point about we have our podcast guy coming in and talking about this, right? I mean, you've been around the block.
I've been around the block, yeah. And my motivation for starting the podcast in the first place was to try to change sales, right? To bring new perspectives to this business and this profession that we've been in, that I've been in forever, that I felt was sort of stuck. And this is to Howard's point exactly, as he knows, and you probably know Richard too, is a huge proponent of the human element of sales and how that's going to drive improved performance and productivity is what do we need to do to make that happen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And it's one of the things we're really just short on in sales is we don't really understand how we improve individual performance, right? There are some people now starting companies talking about, how do we treat the person holistically, right? From a sleep and a stress perspective and a skills perspective, all of this, mental health perspective is treat the whole person. Well, if the whole person is part of the equation, and we say all these parts are equal, which parts of those do a manager have any insight into helping somebody with?
Yeah.
Maybe the skills part, and that's it. And so, we're just not looking at it in a way that other organizations, especially, again, not to fall back on the one I always talk about, but other organizations like sports organizations that are performance-based, that are paying attention to this in a way that we're not in sales, and we are performance activity. And all those things have a big impact. So we need to look at it so differently than we are. And again, to my mind, the point I've made before is the resistance starts at the very top. It's people at the C-level said, well, yeah, we're not going to spend money on that. Yeah, we're not going to spend money on training managers. Why do we want to do that? Right? We're going to, toss a bone at sales training, even though it's aggregate, it's a large number, but we all know the stories about how effective or ineffective it is. Yeah, there's almost no impetus for change. So it's, they'll change one company at a time, like Howard's trying to do with Ring DNA. And hopefully people are inspired by the success and do something similar. Does that answer your question?
It does. I feel like I stole your show from you and, turned the question back on you. So now I'm like, oh, I don't have another question.
Well, that's fine. I'm happy to have it be the Richard Harris show.
No.
Yeah, I would just add as a final note, I think salespeople and whether this is self-serving or not, I think salespeople are a perfect parallel to people in the helping profession because your job as a salesperson is to help craft a narrative and help people move towards a better version of themselves. And if we take that mindset, if we provide the training, the coaching to create situations and opportunities for salespeople to help. And their goal is to help people with their buying process, to help people create a better, more effective company. That will help the salesperson too, if that becomes something that's important to them. Because as I talked about earlier, by reaching out and being of service and helping others, it gives you a mission. It helps you feel better about yourself. And I think we're in a really great position as salespeople, as sales leaders, to be helpful. And so there's a lot of hope for the sales profession because we just need to reshape it a little bit to make sure people have that mindset.
I agree 100%.
Yeah,
Richard, any final comments?
Yeah, I just piggybacking on what Howard said is that I think we've this last year, not just in sales, but I do see it in sales is there's a new baseline. Right. There's a VC I know, and he says he looks at companies to invest in if they're double underlined. If there's a double underline, I'm like, what does that mean? It's like, one, does it actually solve a problem the world needs to have solved? right? In whatever industry. And do they do good in the world? And I remember when all this stuff happened in 2020, a year ago, and we were seeing all kinds of crazy things happen with employees and how people were being laid off, the way that it was happening is, we all said, a lot of us sat back and we said, you know what, people are going to remember that in a year or 2 years from now, right? How you treat someone is really important. And again, I think there's been this unique bubble of like the younger generation has come in saying, look, don't talk to me that way. The older generation's going, yeah, you know what, you're right. We never should have. Nobody, I'll fix it. Like that's sort of where I am. And now this other piece is coming around the world and what's happened in the last 2 years to just sort of kind of make us all go, particularly in sales. We're always a free agent. I'm always a free agent, right? I don't have to, if I worked at a place like Ring DNA, the hope is the culture feels like the kind of culture I'd thrive in and would never want to leave, right? But as soon as something hits the fan, I'd be, all right, who do I know? Who are my recruiters on speed dial? So anyway, so I think we've got a new baseline, which is nice. That's above what it used to be, not below, but above the old version. So I think we're getting there too.
All right. Richard, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Always good to see you guys.
Always good to see you. Howard, always good to see you. And Richard, people want to connect with you. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn, you can always find me, Richard Harris. My email is richard@rharris415.com, richard@rharris415.com. And this is the truth, 415-596-9149, 415-596-9149 is actually my cell phone number. Yes, you call, I will answer. Yes, if you text me, I will respond. And I give it out all the time because rarely does it ever happen.
I was going to say, that's a pretty safe bet these days. And Howard, if people want to connect with you?
Find me at LinkedIn or ringdna.com. I'm not going to give away my phone number because I get too many spam calls, but I'm glad you're not getting it. I continue to try and get off the Zoom info list or all those lists, but it doesn't seem to work.
Yeah.
I got that problem too, but I'm in a different world, right? I do need to talk to people. So.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Richard.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. As always, we're so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank my guests today, Richard Harris and Howard Brown, for sharing their insights with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could also leave us a rating or a review and let us know how we're doing, well, we'd appreciate that. You can do all that on your phone in less than a minute as soon as this episode is over. So thank you for your help. And as always, thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Ever wish you could coach like you've listened to every sales call without actually having to listen to every sales call? Conversation AI from Ring DNA uses the power of artificial intelligence to help busy sales managers know exactly where to focus their coaching efforts. Learn which talking points are working and which are falling flat, ramp new reps faster, and help your entire team master the art of conversation. Unlock your team's full potential with the power of AI. Learn more at ringdna.com/CAI. That's ringdna.com/CAI.